The Picture of Dorian Gray is the only novel written by Oscar Wilde, and it is a profound exploration of aestheticism, moral corruption, and the pursuit of eternal youth. The story delves into the consequences of living a life dedicated to beauty and pleasure, without regard for morality or the well-being of others. The novel begins in the luxurious studio of Basil Hallward, a talented and idealistic painter who becomes infatuated with the beauty of a young man named Dorian Gray. Dorian is an extraordinarily handsome and youthful man, and Basil is inspired to create his best work yet, a portrait of Dorian that captures his beauty in its full, radiant glory. During one of Dorian's visits to Basil's studio, he meets Lord Henry Wotton, a witty and cynical aristocrat who espouses a hedonistic worldview. Lord Henry believes that the only things worth pursuing in life are beauty and sensual pleasure, and he speaks eloquently about the fleeting nature of youth and the importance of living life to the fullest. Dorian, impressionable and intrigued by Lord Henry's philosophy, becomes increasingly captivated by the idea of preserving his youth at any cost. After the portrait is completed, Dorian gazes upon it and, struck by the realization that his own beauty will fade while the portrait remains unchanged, makes a fervent wish that he could remain forever young and that the portrait would age in his place. This seemingly idle wish sets the stage for the dark events that follow. As Dorian begins to embrace Lord Henry's hedonistic lifestyle, he indulges in all manner of pleasures without regard for the consequences. He becomes involved in a passionate relationship with an aspiring actress named Sybil Vane. Sybil, who has fallen deeply in love with Dorian, sees him as her Prince Charming. However, when her acting falters due to her overwhelming emotions, Dorian cruelly rejects her, claiming he can no longer love her because she has lost her talent. Heartbroken, Sybil commits suicide. Although Basil and Lord Henry try to console Dorian, each with their own perspective on the tragedy, Dorian feels a fleeting sense of guilt. However, when he returns home and looks at his portrait, he notices a subtle change, a slight sneer on the painted lips. The portrait has begun to reflect the corruption of his soul, while Dorian himself remains physically unchanged. This realization both horrifies and fascinates Dorian, and he resolves to lock the portrait away, hiding it from the world. From this point on, Dorian spirals deeper into a life of debauchery and vice, with the portrait growing ever more grotesque with each immoral act he commits. He becomes notorious in London society, with rumors circulating about his many vices and the ruin of those who become associated with him. Yet, Dorian's outward appearance remains as youthful and beautiful as ever, allowing him to continue his lifestyle without facing the consequences that would normally accompany such a life. Years pass, and Dorian remains unscathed by time, while his portrait bears the brunt of his moral degradation. He becomes increasingly paranoid and detached, haunted by the knowledge that his soul is withering away, even as his body remains untouched. The once charming and innocent young man has become a figure of fear and mystery. Basil Hallward, unaware of the true nature of Dorian's transformation, confronts him about the rumors and begs him to change his ways. In response, Dorian reveals the hidden portrait to Basil, who is horrified by what he sees, a twisted, monstrous version of Dorian that reflects the evil within him. In a fit of rage and desperation, Dorian murders Basil to keep his secret safe. After this heinous act, Dorian descends even further into madness and despair. He attempts to distract himself with more pleasures and vices, but nothing can alleviate the growing terror he feels toward his own soul. He begins to fear that his very essence is damned beyond redemption. Eventually, unable to bear the burden of his sins and the haunting presence of the portrait, Dorian resolves to destroy the image that has recorded his moral decay. In a final act of desperation, he takes a knife and stabs the portrait, hoping to rid himself of the curse. However, the moment the blade pierces the canvas, the roles reverse. Dorian himself is found dead, aged and withered beyond recognition, with a knife in his heart. The portrait, however, reverts to its original form, showing Dorian Gray as the beautiful and innocent young man he once was. The novel ends with the discovery of Dorian's body by his servants, who are shocked to find the disfigured corpse of an old man lying next to the portrait, which now displays the untainted beauty that Dorian had once possessed. The tragic conclusion serves as a powerful commentary on the dangers of vanity, unchecked hedonism, and the moral consequences of living a life devoted solely to the pursuit of pleasure. The Picture of Dorian Gray is a haunting and thought-provoking novel that explores the complexities of human nature, the consequences of living a life detached from moral responsibility, and the ultimate futility of trying to escape the passage of time and the decay of the soul. Through the character of Dorian Gray, Wilde masterfully critiques the superficial values of society and the dangers of valuing appearance over substance.